On this podcast, you'll find interviews with high-performing, successful individuals in life sciences. On a weekly basis, we cover their proven methods, principles, strategies, and mindsets to implement new technologies that scale to meet the needs of people in our world.
Welcome to the Life Science Success Podcast, Benedicta.
Thank you very much, Dan.
Yeah, so would you just tell the listeners a little bit about yourself? What is it that you do? And you're the CEO of Afro Body, so I'd love to hear a little bit about that as well.
Sure, no problem. So I'm the co-founder and CEO of Afrobodies, but perhaps going back a little bit, my background is actually in chemical engineering. And so I started my career in the oil and gas and energy sectors. I've actually worked offshore in exploration. And around 2015, 2016 is when actually I came together with the co-founder of our company, Dr. Peter Durkin, speaking about the need for more biotechnology companies in South Africa. And just, I want to say, I've had a lot of work or diplomacy or advocacy in this field of STEM in South Africa. So having studied chemical engineering, have got a few different accolades, women in science and things like that to support science. We came together to really develop a company that would actually produce products, biological products out of South Africa for global consumption. So that's been going since 2016, is when really we, formally reached the company. And from 2018 is when we made our first, I want to say, proof of concept or developed our first antibody. So my involvement has really been, I want to say, doing a lot more of the stakeholder management and engagement.
Sure.
When you're a startup, you need to raise initial grant funding, you need to build the team, and you need to find the collaborators and partnerships. So I've been doing a lot of that kind of work and continue to do that sort of work to get us, to grow.
Yeah. It's not an easy job whenever I look at the job of the CEO,
Yes.
especially in life sciences, because you have some very expensive things that you have to go do. You have to convince people to invest, but you also need people then to go do them, to go execute on them as well.
That's right. Yes. That's quite correct. So the responsibility in the CEO, especially when you're growing in a sector that is not so, I want to say, popular or common. First one is generally to explain what it is that you do and its value in the markets that you're in. So in South Africa, there aren't as many biotechnology companies. We'd be the first commercial producers of antibodies in also. So sort of researchers or companies that are using antibodies in South Africa would be importing them. So now it's 99% of them are imported. That's also was kind of I want to say the pain point we're addressing when we started the company is that if you're importing such a key component to your research that actually enables the advancement of science and research, you paying a premium price because we're very far away from where actually the markets are, where they're purchasing them from. And you're also having logistical issues around customs. The cost becomes exorbitant. And actually, it inhibits the research capabilities because then researchers have budgets. And, where they have to kind of compare what do they use, and they'll choose antibodies they can find cheaply, that are easily accessible. So what we really try to do is also step into the markets and say, you can have someone really at your doorstep that can develop novel antibodies for you, and that can also, allow you to look into particular proteins or different areas that you haven't previously thought possible to look into because you've had this, kind of barrier to entry. So that's kind of the work, that's involved. That it's just market access. It's also understanding what the market is requiring. And I have a good understanding of our South African market, but also now expanding globally as well in how you change the narratives in your products and what you're selling so that it's, it's not seen as, it's a subgrade product because from Africa or from South Africa. So there's a lot of advocacy work, I think, that I kind of take on as well in terms of putting us on the map.
And trying to tell people that your product makes equal quality and
100%. We also make high quality antibodies, and we've actually had customers that are in the UK, and recently towards the end of last year we had a customer who was US based actually. So we are getting that reach, And in terms of leads, so in terms of just inquiries for products, they are coming from different institutions, including Harvard, which, for most, researchers, that's quite a big one.
Right.
So we are getting, I think, a good hit rate in terms of, we making these products, and they are the alpaca recombinant antibodies. So they're also a special type of antibody. So someone who's coming is looking for that small nano size antibody to use in their research.
So companies that normally come to you, what part of their research are they in? Where would they normally start with you?
So a lot of them are, let's say, so there's 3 segments really where you becoming as a customer. Life science, so that is really researchers, so in sort of the wide variety in terms of health and life sciences. And they're coming to us because perhaps they want to study a particular protein, they want a virus, if it's COVID-19, for example, which we did actually make an antibody for. They're coming and saying, I want to be able to detect this. And the way in which antibodies work is they bind onto these molecules or bacteria. And so we then develop that for them. In diagnostics, it's someone who wants to detect or test for the presence of then, whether it's a protein or a molecule or bacteria and so forth. So, for example, an interesting project we've had was in the agricultural space. They wanted, so they were fruit exporters into Europe, and a lot of the fruits are getting turned back because they were exceeding the minimum residue levels of the pesticides in them. And the way in which the process works is there's a little bit of a spray and pray, I say, approach with the, in the fields when they're growing the crop.
Pesticide, sure.
Yeah. And so they wanted to find a way that they could detect in the pack houses before the fruits, kind of like before exporting, which of these chemicals are higher in the content. So then they probably can do a bit of an adjustment back into the field
Oh, wow.
with the farmers. So there's different applications, and sometimes it's interesting for us as well when the customers kind of thought, can your antibody actually help me with this? And so in an instance like diagnostics, so for detection, you need a device, sort of the actual test kit. So we make the antibody, but then the best solution is to partner with someone who develops the actual test
Very
kit
interesting.
itself. Yeah. So we've done projects in that. And then the third segment would be therapeutics. So this is now, I want to say, disease treatment work. We've been exploring different diseases, TBs. It's a big one in South Africa. We're actually going to recently, so we're going to very soon start a project on RSV as well. And cancer is also a big area. So also looking at, can this antibody bind only to the, let's say, the cancer situation, only to the molecule of interest and not, to sort of other sort of cell that you shouldn't be binding to. And in treatment, you want to target the bad, kind
Sure.
of a molecule in your system. So that's kind of what's coming through. And that's who we want to really grow and get our name out there to say we are here, we're making these high quality antibodies. The recombinant methodology means that from your first batch to the millionth batch, it's the same quality, same sequence because it gets cloned. And so, that's really where we are at.
Oh, perfect. In terms of the companies that come to you whenever they initially come in, how do they get started? So do they just reach out to somebody in your company and
Yes. Some of it is cold calling, and some would be, in an instance like today, we are, at the conference and reaching out to, potential customers and obviously saying, hey, this is what we can do. And the process so if it is especially a novel antibody being developed, the process can run up to about 5 months from, you have to immunize the alpacas and then they generate the immune response, and then you kind of take the rest of the process into the laboratory. So that's, that whole process then will last about 5 months. But they then take it to test in their own systems because, the biological molecules, it's no one, no one generally can with 100% certainty that it will work. It has to be tested and validated. So we do our own validation, and we try our best to also get external validation. That's really important, that we could validate for ourselves in the lab, get someone else to use that in a particular system, and then that it would actually work in different systems and applications.
Do you have anything that you're announcing here at the show?
Yes. So I think the main thing is really just to say that we've developed now a catalog of 15 antibodies. Actually, we're terming our antibodies Afrobodies, so African antibodies. And that's, yes, the company is growing. We have the capabilities to make antibodies. They are recombinant alpaca antibodies used in life science research capabilities, and that we really looking to partner with different, I want to say, developers in the therapeutics and diagnostics markets. And yes, come and see us at our stand. We're at the South African Pavilion. And also you can look into our website and follow us on our LinkedIn pages as well.
Perfect. There are 3 questions that I like to ask every guest. What inspires you?
What inspires me? So many different things. It might sound cliche, but with the history in South Africa, I'm born in the 80s, so I come from pre-apartheid to post-apartheid era. So I know sort of what is available out there in the world now and the exposure to that. And then there's still people who perhaps don't get to see or be exposed to what I can see. So I really do find myself being quite an advocate in the space. I think I've done a lot kind of throughout, in the sense that I've seen opportunity for me because others have lended a hand,
Sure.
given me a foothold. Even now, it's been growing our company, Afrobodies. There's been a lot of people who come in to support different organizations, our government organizations, and just private companies and people.
Nice.
So that's inspired me. I really believe in that whole passing it on philosophy. And so really that would be a legacy to leave behind for my kids. I've got 2 young kids. So they definitely, have something to look forward to, and how, to be in the world. We live for more than just ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What concerns you?
Whew. A few things. Our current exchange rates. So
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
having come into the US dollar from the South African rand, but I think it's the geopolitics and just the global economics. There's a lot that seems to have been happening in the last 5 to 10 years. Then one would remember. Sometimes you almost feel as though the world is moving at a pace that you cannot keep up with. It's great that you have the globalization, but you've got things around climate change and how, different nations are trying to come to the middle ground with regards to that. But there's so many competing priorities, and this particular region or country's reality is not the same as someone else's. And so how do you find common ground? It'll be the same. I mean, COVID-19 exposed a lot of things of the haves and have-nots. So we see that in our country, but we actually, I feel also in the sector that we're in with health sciences, it exposed the haves and have-nots, and what it means for someone to just very quickly access vaccine and block out those who cannot pay for it. So those are things, that those injustices and they seem to be getting a bit under a microscope in different sectors.
Yes.
And there's going to just have to be a different way of resolving these global, matters or global issues. Otherwise, you exacerbate, in a really quite a fragile system in many ways for various reasons of inequality, and be it race or gender and otherwise. And
right.
Yeah. So that's it's a heavy one, but it is. It's a reality.
I mean, I think because this reaches beyond diversity, right? So it's beyond diversity. It's out to the point of, like to your point of the haves and have-nots, right? Who has access to life-saving medicine for their particular areas of the world.
Yeah.
I know is even something that came home, to the U.S. as well, because we had outsourced so much of our manufacturing.
Yeah.
There were a lot of conversations I know that I was a party to that essentially, hey, we need to sort of look at, what needs to be brought back, right?
Yeah.
Because
You
it's
need
great
it,
to outsource, but at the same time, in these pandemic times, who knows what could happen. So,
exactly. Yeah. And it is those things, at a particular point in time, it seems like a great model, also probably driven by, the cost of production and profits that you're trying to drive for. But like, there isn't maybe just a 5 or 10 year horizon of just looking over the hill of the nice, maybe success and profits to say what is the unintended consequences of that. And you are seeing there was a big push of outsourcing, I want to say, in sort of like 2010. And now a lot of nations are realizing we need to bring these things back in-house. And I want to say even in Africa, there's often a lot of talk about why do we export our raw materials when we can produce items locally? And so in many ways, Afrobodies is speaking to that same narrative of we can do this ourselves. Let us be the ones who are supplying the world, but more importantly, let us be the ones who can supply our own researchers and
Right.
our own entities in our in our backyard. So I think there's a little bit of putting on your own mask before assisting that of the passengers
Yeah,
around.
exactly. Yeah, so it's similar to the airplane model.
Yeah.
Last question, what excites you?
Oh, what excites me? Believe it or not, traveling. So I say traveling. I've done quite a lot of travel over kind of my career span. The other day we were doing a trivia, and I think I got to 48 countries.
Wow.
And with that, it's just the interesting people you meet,
Sure.
and more and more you understand the world firsthand. I think in that sense of traveling. So it would also be whether it's for business or for leisure. It's just continually expanding your world and your horizon, your viewpoint. And I'm a firm believer in that there really is always a different side to the story, multiple perspectives that come into a particular view. And I think it just keeps me in check. So it excites me that as long as I have the capability and ability to explore and travel. It's my first time in Boston, and I'm enjoying that. I'm loving that I get to be in another part of. I've been into USA many times, but not to Boston. And it's quite different to the other city that I've also visited. So even that in itself is giving me a different, perspective how things function here, whether it's for work or leisure or otherwise. So I traveling does excite me. It's got many, many benefits to it.
Very, very interesting.
Mm.
Well, Benedicta, thank you so much for being a guest on the Life Science Success Podcast. I greatly appreciate you being here, and I really appreciate getting to learn a little bit more about Afrobodies as well and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for listening to Life Science Success. For complete details about this podcast, including show notes, how to get in touch with guests, and more episodes, please visit www.lifesciencesuccess.com. If there's someone you'd like for us to invite to the show as a guest, please let me know by sending me a message at the podcast website. Please click subscribe on your favorite podcast app, share the podcast, or tell a friend about it, and last but not least, rate the podcast. Thank you again.